Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and always a pleasure having you drop by. Let me start with David Inglis, short on VIX at a record, and that took me back to halcyon days. Wikipedia has an article on halcyon days and it reads thus. From Latin Alcyone, daughter of Julius and the wife of Sikhs. When her husband died in a shipwreck, Alcyone threw herself into the sea, whereupon the gods transformed them both into halcyon birds, kingfishers. When Alcyone made her nest on the beach, waves threatened to destroy it. Julius restrained his winds and kept them calm during 7 days in each year, so she could lay her eggs. These became known as the halcyon days, when storms do not occur. Today, the term is used to denote a past period that is being remembered for being happy and or successful. Central banks killing all volatility, euro-dollar 6-month vol all-time lows, VIX new lows of the year, and trading at levels last seen in 2018, the market ear. Home thoughts. I finished reading Night Boat to Tangier by Kevin Barry. It's luminous, it's remarkable, and it's dark. Charlie Redmond and Maurice Hearn are Cork drug dealers, former big-time suppliers and users. Now into their 50s, their black money is squandered. They have done and could still do terrible things. The years are rolling out like tide now. There is old weather on their faces, on the hard lines of their jaws, on their chaotic mouths, but they retain just about a rakish air. It's October 2018 and Charlie and Maurice find themselves keeping vigil at the Algeciras ferry terminal in southern Spain, where the night boats to Tangier depart and dock. This place has the clear contours of purgatory, perhaps one that Charlie and Maurice deserve. It is a Hades crossing point, a portal to dread. Dilly fled Ireland after the death of her mother to join New Age travellers, moving on queasy and confounding ley lines between Spain and North Africa in ways Charlie and Maurice struggle to fathom. They're waiting there, trying to find the daughter, and you don't know whose daughter it is actually. They have not seen Dilly for 3 years, but they have street intelligence of her whereabouts, often gleaned by intimidation. The roads after the rain were black, sliding tongues and gleamed. The cold white moon speaks highly of the coming winter. Here is the creepy nosing landlord of a West Island cottage, where Charlie and Cynthia tried to hide out from dangerous men. There was a papery film like moth skin stretched over his eyes. He slithered about, making goldfish gasps, as if traumatized by an other world, invisible but to his eyes. Barry's sensibility is eerie. He's attuned to spirits, to malevolent presences, the psychic tundra around us. But what distinguishes this book beyond its humour, terror and beauty of description is its moral perception. It's really remarkably good. I recommend it. Silencing the voices of criticism is a perennial preoccupation of power. Wole Soyinka. I came across a poem by Jorge Luis Borges, The Moon. There is so much loneliness in that gold. The moon of every night is not the moon that the first Adam saw. The centuries of human wakefulness have left it brimming with ancient tears. Look at it. It is your mirror. As you know, I discovered Carlos Cruz Diaz, who I think is fabulous. This is Physiochromia 13, Caracas, Venezuela, 1960. This is Physiochromie 1304, Paris, France, 1997. And this is Induction Chromatique, 1960, from an exhibition in Paris. Political reflections. In my own China network, I'm seeing ripples of disbelief about Hong Kong results. This reveals a potentially far bigger problem for the CCP. Mainland friends are asking why the Hong Kong people did this and why their own views were so wrong. A creeping sense their world view is incomplete, which is an interesting point. Turkish F-16 warplanes flew over the capital Ankara on Monday to test its new Russian S-400 missile defenses, Turkish media reported. Ankara's purchase of the S-400s has been a major factor souring relations with the United States, which says the system is not compatible with NATO defenses and poses a threat to Lockheed Martin F-35 stealth fighter jets. It's incredible that Trump has given so much leeway to President Erdogan. Reuters special report, time to take out our swords inside Iran's plot to attack Saudi Arabia. The group included the top echelons of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, an elite branch of the Iranian military whose portfolio includes missile development and covert operations. The main topic that day in May, how to punish the United States for pulling out of a landmark nuclear treaty and reimposing economic sanctions on Iran. It is time to take out our swords and teach them a lesson, the commander said, according to four people familiar with the meeting. This account, described to Reuters by three officials familiar with the meetings and a fourth close to Iran's decision-making, is the first to describe the role of Iran's leaders in plotting the September 14 attack on Saudi Aramco. These people said Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei approved the operation, but with strict conditions. Iranian forces must avoid hitting any civilians or Americans. No, 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 and no, Mir Yousefi said to detailed questions from Reuters on the alleged gatherings and Khamenei's purported role. The 17-minute strike on 2 Aramco facilities by 18 drones and 3 low-flying missiles revealed the vulnerability of the Saudi oil company, despite billions spent by the kingdom on security. The attack temporarily halved Saudi Arabia's oil production and knocked out 5% of the world's supply. Global crude prices spiked. The official close to Iran's decision-making said the group settled on the plan to attack Saudi Arabia's oil installations because it could grab big headlines, inflict economic pain on an adversary, and still deliver a strong message to Washington. The attack was the worst on Middle East oil facilities since Saddam Hussein, the late Iraqi strongman, torched Kuwait's oil fields during the 1991 Gulf crisis. A Middle East source who was briefed by a country investigating the attack said the launch site was the Avaz air base in southwest Iran. Rather than fly directly from Iran to Saudi Arabia over the Gulf, the missiles and drones took different circuitous paths to the oil installations, part of Iran's effort to mask its involvement, people said. Some of the craft flew over Iraq and Kuwait, before landing in Saudi Arabia, according to Western intelligence sources, who said that the trajectory provided Iran with plausible deniability. Do not strike another sovereign state, do not threaten American interests, American forces, or we will respond, US Defense Secretary Marc Esper warned Tehran. In Iran, hardliners have come to believe that Trump is a Twitter tiger, Vaez said. As such, there is little diplomatic or military cost associated with pushing back. Iran knows exactly what it needs to do to see sanctions lifted, the official said. In one of the final meetings held ahead of the Saudi oil attack, another Revolutionary Guards commander was already looking ahead, according to the official close to Iran's decision-making, who was briefed on that gathering. Rest assured, Allah Almighty will be with us, the commander told senior security officials. Start planning the next one. My article touched on this over the weekend. If Iran wants to eat, it has to obey the US. And I was asking whether maximum pressure was working. And essentially, I concluded by saying the alliance of Pompeo, the MAGA tweet army, Mariam Rajavi, and the MEK is just not credible. It's incredible. Of course, Arab NATO, which includes the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the GCC, and Israel, is a lot more credible, and they are surely guiding the inferno. However, if a civil war is ignited in the Shia crescent, and the nature of the hybrid warfare indicates this is the direction of travel, the implosion will engender catastrophic consequences which will be impossible to manage and which surely will imperil Arab NATO itself. And I concluded by saying oil is the purest proxy and is at an 8-week high, and currently at 57.90. Tens of thousands of Iranians rallied in the streets of Tehran in support of the government. This is from E.J. Malrai. Rand publication headline, Swarming and the Future of Conflict. This is what I think Pompeo, MEK, and Mariam Rajavi got up to. In Athena's camp, we speculated that swarming is already emerging as an appropriate doctrine for networked forces to wage information-age conflict. This nascent doctrine derives from the fact that robust connectivity allows for the creation of a multitude of small units of maneuver, networked in such a fashion that although they might be widely distributed, they can still come together at will and repeatedly to deal resounding blows to their adversaries. This study builds on these earlier findings by inquiring at length into why and how swarming might be emerging as a preferred mode of conflict for small, dispersed, internetted units. In our view, swarming will likely be the future of conflict. Social conflict also features pack-like organizations exemplified by modern-day soccer hooligans. They generally operate in a loosely dispersed fashion, then swarm against targets of opportunity who are cut out from a larger group of people. The use of modern information technologies from the internet to cell phones has facilitated plans and operations by such gangs. Swarming depends on robust information flow and a necessary condition for successful swarming. In other words, by controlling communication and sending texts to protesters, random groups are mobilized together in one or various spots. Chaos ensues, which naturally draws reaction. One is never aware of the origin of the messages. In one of her talks, Suzanne Maloney of Brookings seemed to know the exact number of cell phones in use in Iran. Asia Times Online, Iran-Israel raise tensions to obscure domestic woes. Israel and Iran have something in common. Both face instability at home. In both Iran and Israel, the next step is most likely to be a ramping up of tensions between them to divert attention from their domestic problems. In October, Netanyahu declared that the Iranian threat to Israeli security now emanated not only from Iran itself, but also from Iraq and even from as far away as Yemen, suggesting that Israel is ready to widen its theatre of military action against Iran. This could set in motion a dangerous cycle of intensifying tit-for-tat actions by Iran and Israel as ruling regimes in both countries seek to distract their respective publics from their domestic failures. The region is in for a dangerously unpredictable winter. Iraqi security forces deny coup attempt as protest death toll continues to rise. The Middle East Eye, Iraq's most elite military unit, has been forced to deny that it was in the process of launching a coup in the country after a post on its social media account announced the beginning of a military insurrection. A spokesperson for the counter-terrorism services said the accounts had been hacked by weak-spirited people and that the claims had no credibility at all. Despite this, the tweets originally sent out on Monday morning were still available by the afternoon, and this is the image that was posted. China cables the largest incarceration of a minority since the Holocaust. Contained in a telegram called New Secret 5656, the instructions were written in 2017, when the policy of incarcerating people from ethnic minorities in Xinjiang was being put into effect on an industrial scale. What has since been put in place has been described by Zenz as the most systematic campaign of mass surveillance and mass oppression the world has ever seen, including what is probably the largest incarceration of an ethno-religious minority since the Holocaust. Strategies to eliminate dissent, enforce loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party via indoctrination camps and other coercive methods, and to stamp out the independent practice of Islam and Uyghur culture. The main purpose behind the camps, the breaking apart of families, putting children into orphanages where they are to be raised as hand-speaking atheists, is not to combat terrorism, but to protect the power of the party. And I wrote about this severally. China has unveiled a digital panopticon in Xinjiang, and I also said that the current modus operandi is running on empty. Former Prime Minister Tony Blair accuses the Labour and Conservative parties of peddling two sets of fantasies in their manifestos. That's why I call that article The Lotus Eaters in the UK election. Is it possible to do an FTA in 11 months? Dimitri opines. Absolutely. On a completely unrelated note, here's a Mona Lisa someone smashed out in an afternoon. Sterling last trading at 128.86, but I'm expecting it to hurdle 130 and move towards 134. Yankee dollar is king in anti-imperialist Venezuela. In the upmarket Sambiel Mall, the loudspeaker is blaring Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in Spanish as Venezuelans do their early Christmas shopping. Zara, Ben Sherman, Mango, Adidas, Victoria's Secret, Timberland, Reebok and Guess are just some of the brands that have outlets here. In all of them, people are spending US dollars. This process, which they call dollarization, can be useful for the recovery and for unleashing the country's productive forces and for the functioning of the economy. Nicolas Maduro said it is an escape valve. Thank God it exists. I'd say around 70% of all our sales are now in dollars, says Jennifer Bagarin, owner of a shop selling children's clothes in a mall in Caracas. It's really taken off since the middle of this year. A few people use euros, but hardly anyone buys in Bolivares cash anymore. A recent study by local consultancy Eco Analytica found that over half of all financial transactions in Venezuela paid for in foreign currency, primarily dollars. In the country's second city, Maracaibo, close to the Colombian border, the figure is 86%. Even after the government lopped 5 zeros off the currency and issued a whole load of new banknotes last year, the bolivar is of little worth. The largest note in circulation is the 50,000 bolivar note, worth about $1.60. The smallest is worth a fraction of a US cent. Go to a cash machine and the maximum amount you can withdraw is equivalent to 10 US cents. Steve Hanke, an inflation expert at the Johns Hopkins University, says Venezuela's annual inflation rate is at around 10,000%. God. I was complaining about Zimbabwe, which was less than 1,000. And the country is enduring the third longest period of hyperinflation on record, surpassed only by Nicaragua in the late 1980s and Greece during World War II. The IMF predicts inflation of 200,000% this year and 500,000% next year. Finally, economists say the prolonged blackouts that hit Venezuela earlier this year fueled dollarization. When the lights go out, it is impossible to use debit cards for transactions. Yuval Harari, money is accordingly a system of mutual trust, and not just any system of mutual trust. Money is the most universal and most efficient system of mutual trust ever devised. The edge, there is no honest way to explain it, because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. The Chavez Revolution was always a rebellion in the superpowers' backyard, and the machine was eventually going to bring it to heel by hook or by crook. Trump, of course, relishes his financial warfare strategies. Oh, that is Kashmir. Let me remind you, Sufi Musafir, this is your incredible India, tweeted the Kashmiris. As I wrote, the frontier from Xinjiang to Kashmir, from Gaza to Crimea, from Hong Kong to Taiwan are 21st century flashpoints. If you are in Kashmir, which was described by Nehru as the snowy bosom of the Himalayas, and which is currently switched off from the 21st century, Prime Minister Modi revoked Article 370, which protected Kashmir's demography by restricting residency to Kashmiris alone, and under a subsection known as Article 35A, forbade the sale of property to non-Kashmiris. Essentially, Modi is seeking to flood the zone. You don't bring bad news to the cult leader inside the fall of WeWork is just mind-boggling. On the afternoon of September 18, 2019, WeWork co-founder Adam Neumann was in his office at WeWork's Chelsea headquarters when he got a text alert on his iPhone. The Wall Street Journal had just published an explosive article chronicling what it said was his reckless managing of the co-working startup, the era's preeminent unicorn. Neumann is dyslexic and reading is a challenge, so advisors quickly briefed him on the story's most troubling details. Vivid accounts of his heavy drinking, marijuana use and habit of making grandiose pronouncements, like wanting to be elected president of the world, live forever, and become humanity's first trillionaire. Just weeks earlier, WeWork had been privately valued at $47 billion, which was $10 billion more than the market cap of Ford and double the GDP of Iceland. Now, unless WeWork secured a new source of emergency funding, it would run out of cash before Thanksgiving. WeWork executives had long grown accustomed to Neumann's belief that the laws of economics, even reality itself, didn't apply to him. It was in the nature of unicorns that they bent reality, and that had certainly been true of WeWork. fueled by $12 billion of venture capital and debt, Neumann grew WeWork in less than a decade from a single co-working outpost in Soho into a 12,500 employee company with 500,000 users in 111 cities across 29 countries. But in 2018, WeWork had lost $2 billion and had a highly questionable business model. The company signed long-term leases and sublet space to freelancers and corporations on a short-term basis. Its valuation somehow kept rising. Neumann was chauffeured around in a $100,000 plus Maybach sedan and travelled the world on a $60 million Gulfstream G650. $21 million mansion in the Bay Area that features a room shaped like a guitar. In a way, the spending made sense because Neumann himself was the product. Every investor who walked through was sold, a WeWork executive told me. They saw Neumann as a millennial prophet who did shots of Don Julio during meetings while preaching about the dawn of a new corporate culture, one in which the beer and kombucha flowed and MacBook-toting employees would love coming to work. Infrared sauna in his office, Peloton bike, cold water plunge, combination of egomaniacal glamour and millennial mysticism. The Neumann sold WeWork not merely as a real estate play, it wasn't even a tech company. Even capable of solving the world's thorniest problems. Last summer, some WeWork executives were shocked to discover Neumann was working on Jared Kushner's Mid-East peace effort. According to two sources, Neumann assigned WeWork's Director of Development, Ronnie Behar, to hire an advertising firm to produce a slick video for Kushner that would showcase what an economically transformed West Bank and Gaza would look like. Kushner showed a version of the video during his speech at the White House's peace conference in Bahrain last summer. Adam was probably the best salesman of all time. Told an executive that Jamie Dimon was his personal banker and might leave JP Morgan to run Neumann's family investment office one day. Most fervent believer was Masayoshi Masason, the 62-year-old CEO of Japan's SoftBank Group. Masa would invest $10 billion in WeWork. Adam later said, "I'm crazy, but Masa is crazier." Investors were shocked by WeWork spiraling losses, and that the company had spent millions on Neumann vanity projects such as a wave pool company and a startup that sold turmeric coffee creamer. Suddenly, the Pasha lifestyle that made Neumann an avatar of the new economy seemed like something else. Millennial entitlement gone insane. A collapsing unicorn bends reality the other way. Hyper-confidence that one attendee most recalled. When the financial crisis hit in 2008, Neumann had burned through an investment from his grandmother, nearly $100,000, and scrambled to hire a lawyer to renew his visa stay in the country. To help pay rent, he let another company sublet space in Crawler's Brooklyn loft. It was the genesis of the WeWork idea. After hours, members participated in yoga classes, wine tastings, and networking panels. Until a few years ago, the Neumanns were devout followers of Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical faith, and it infused WeWork's office culture. Paraded through the office barefoot with celebrities like Drake and Ashton Kutcher, and had an unnerving ability to maintain eye contact during conversation, lending him the aura of a guru. Every one of us is here because it has meaning, because we want to do something that actually makes the world a better place. And we want to make money doing it. The crowd of thousands exploded in cheers. So many of the people were young and had never worked in a real company. They bought all of it, a former executive said. His gravitational pull was drawing in the world's biggest investors. Massa informed Neumann he had precisely 12 minutes to hear a presentation. Afterward, Neumann followed Massa outside to his car, hoping to continue the pitch. Massa told Neumann he didn't think his business plan would work, Neumann's problem was that he needed to think bigger. WeWork shouldn't just be leasing offices to small businesses. It should be leasing office space to all business. Massa scribbled on an iPad that the number SoftBank was prepared to invest $4.4 billion. Adam dazzled Massa, an investment banker close to both of them, said. Adam's fantasy land became a reality. Neumann sat down with world leaders discussing the Syrian refugee crisis with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and urban planning with Sadiq Khan. When Adam got in front of world leaders, it was like he started thinking he was one. His pronouncements became wilder. He told one investor that he'd convinced Rahm Emanuel to run for president in 2020. Told colleagues he was saving the women of Saudi Arabia by working with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to offer women coding classes. In another meeting, Neumann said 3 people were going to save the world: bin Salman, Jared Kushner, and Neumann. This is just incredible, isn't it? Marketing consultant Jonathan Mildenhall, whom WeWork hired to develop its brand, was also advising Rebecca on her personal image. He asked her questions like, are you a magician, maverick, or a muse? Oh my goodness, you can't make this stuff up. Massa said, we're going to be a $1 trillion company, he shouted, according to a former executive who heard it. You're thinking billions and we should be thinking trillions. You people need to be better than you are. Former executive said Neumann often reacted poorly. You don't bring bad news to the cult leader. So, WeWork was a group delusion, and Neumann is not the only guilty party. Having once been a prophet, he now speaks of himself as a martyr, people close to him say. In his office he keeps a card with 3 lessons. He wrote, listen, be on time, be a good partner. He thought about flying to Tokyo to see his one-time patron Masayoshi Son, but decided not to. He tried drafting a letter to WeWork employees, but as of mid-November, he hadn't figured out what to say. What a story. Putin and Xi Jinping will jointly open the 4,000-kilometer Power of Siberia gas pipeline on December the 2nd. The $12 billion project reduces Russia's reliance on the European energy market and is seen as a symbol of the country's pivot to Asia. Currency markets: euro dollar 110.15, dollar index 98.291, Japanese yen 108.95, Swiss franc 0.9966, the pound 128.86, the Australian dollar 0.6780, India rupee 71.595, South Korean won 11.7625, the Rial 422.67, Egyptian pound 16.1195, and the Rand 14.795. Dollar index last at 98.291, Euro dollar 110.15. This chart is from FX Pip Titan. As I've said many times, the most important currency to watch is the renminbi. 1 month implied volatility on the Chinese currency just fell below the 3-month measure. Calm coming back also beneath the surface for now. David Inglis. Global commodity index is not just weak due to the US dollar relative and modest strength, but due to the evidence of excess supply and poor demand growth. That's David Lacalle. Gold hasn't really got much momentum. $14.55, 25 cents. Crude oil, $57.90. I think there's a big spike risk. Coffee thoughts, a nice gain from October lows. That's from Tommy Thornton. Cocoa futures also has had a nice gain. That's from Tommy Thornton as well. Africa called back our ambassador to South Sudan for consultations as we re-evaluate our relationship with the government of South Sudan, Secretary Pompeo. They truly are the most useless leaders you could ever have. We will work with the region to support efforts to achieve peace and a successful political transition in South Sudan. Al-Shabaab issued a new decree on land and property tax in Mogadishu. Villa, $150. High-rise, $300. $100 for corrugated iron sheet. Group says new tax comes into force after 24 hours. We're only now realizing that under Mugabe things were actually softer. that he was shielding us from the mongrels that lurked behind him, the same bloodthirsty mongrels that are now in power, Tendai Biti. Brutality of baton-wielding riot police who witnesses said had focused on women coincided with the renaming of dozens of streets in honor of President Mnangagwa to mark the second anniversary of the ousting of Mugabe, who died in September. Mr. Biti, who was arrested, tortured and put on trial after last year's contentious election, which gave Mnangagwa his own mandate, added, "Our people are dying like flies. Our health system has collapsed, and now they are renaming roads after themselves." In a reflection of Zimbabwe's new allegiances as it weathers criticism and sanctions from Europe and America, Fife Avenue in Harare is to become Brezhnev Avenue after Leonid Brezhnev, who was the Soviet leader in 1964 to 1982. Mao Zedong is also to be honored. A 10-month-old baby strapped on her mother's back was among those rounded up and taken into custody. Witnesses said that the woman had been on her way to the bank. Mnangagwa was recently in Dubai sharing his story and incredible potential with entrepreneurs and investors. As I said, he is, frankly, as untenable as his erstwhile mentor. Now I was quoting Maria Vargas Llosa, The Neighborhood, which was a book about Peru in the time of Fujimori and the Dr. Vladimiro Montesinos, who wrote "Something bigger than you and me, power. You don't fool around with power, my friend." Waste storage at Africa's only nuclear plant is brimming. Storage of high-level radioactive waste is a major environmental concern in the region as South Africa looks to extend Coburg's life for another 2 decades and mulls extra nuclear power plants. Coburg's spent fuel storage capacity is currently over 90% full. It's about 35 kilometers from Cape Town. South African ratings, you can see Fitch and S&P lower than Moody's. Charlie Robertson in October was saying that it's going to be downgraded to junk. South African all shares up 7.61% year to date, dollar rand 14.7918. Cairo is a safari for the ears, an oral amuse-bouche. Even the dead of night is soundtracked by traffic, music and boat horns echoing down the Nile. The Egyptian pound 16.1476, EGX 30 up 7.2% year to date. Nigerian central bank effectively borrowing dollars to keep the exchange rate fixed. The story of the Nigerian macro investment space, FDI $230 million a quarter, insignificant for a country of Nigeria's size. Foreign funds only buying short-term securities thanks to incredible returns at the central bank, which is effectively borrowing the dollar to keep the exchange rate fixed. Nigerian all shares down 13.98% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange minus 14.4% year to date. DR Congo palm oil firm Feronia accused of abuses. This is funded by the likes of the Commonwealth Development Corporation, and there's a hard-hitting report by Human Rights Watch. Kenya's central bank lowered interest rates for the first time in 16 months. Low inflation gave policymakers scope to cut. They cut 50 basis points. The removal of the limit on borrowing costs that were in place for 3 years helped the central bank to regain more control over the transmission of policy decisions to the economy. Reduced to 8.5% from 9%. Ramanyang, what if I told you that between October 2018 and October 2019, maize grain cost 47% more, or that maize flour prices rose by 32 to 49% more. Mohamed Welie, with the government of Kenya raiding the parastatals and therefore sucking liquidity out of the system, CBK should have gone for the nuclear option and cut the CRR, which I think is a good point. DTB, Diamond Trust Kenya, reported Q3 earnings per share rose 7.143%. Holdings of government securities, 97 billion. Loans and advances to customers was down 2.857% to 192 billion. Loan loss provision reduced 63.65%. Net NPL increased 107.1%. The details are on rich wrap-ups. The Nairobi All Shares up 10.98% and the NSE 20 is down 7.42% year to date. Thank you.